Update: I don't know how to help my wife's anorexia, which she developed after I blew our savings buying my mother a house. I talked to my wife Allie when I came down for Christmas after my mom's house sold, and based on what I'd been reading, I pushed the eating disorder thing a bit in my initial opening to the conversation. She just sat and listened to me. I told her I was scared about her starving herself, that she could die, that I empathized because I had an addiction too. Called her out on the pro-ana sites and lack of food. I don't think I'll ever forget her reaction after I finally shut up. She just laughed. This really cold and angry kind of laugh I have honestly never heard come out of her mouth in the almost decade I've known her. I literally just had a nightmare about it the other night. It was followed by her saying, "Are you serious right now?" She launched into what can only be described as an avalanche of anger and incredulity wrapped in a bomb. She ranted on for about 10 minutes. She said that in the beginning of the year when she'd left, she apparently got really into fitness and nutrition and after a couple of months started training for a half marathon. She pulled up her calories in an app on her phone and gave it to me. They were all probably more than what I eat, mostly tofu, rice, beans, veggies, and protein supplements. Always over 2,000 calories a day. She told me that she'd worked her way up from nothing to going 10 miles a day. She loved it, but I was so engrossed in my own addiction and 12-step stuff that she didn't really mention it because she didn't want me to crap on that too, because I had a habit of not really saying much about her accomplishments. She kept that up all year until fall when she went back to SoCal. I didn't mention it in my last post because I didn't think it was pertinent, but I had a relapse in late September, early October. It spent a lot of cash we didn't have, but I guess I didn't really realize how that would affect her. She apparently couldn't afford to eat. She stopped training because she couldn't buy enough groceries to even eat enough in general. She started crying and practically yelling at this point and told me about how her stomach started growling during one of her classes loudly, to the point where another teacher came up to her between classes and asked her about it. I'll never forget, ever, Allie yelling at me and saying, "Do you have any idea how humiliated I was?" I felt, and still feel, like an absolute piece of crap. The pro-ana sites were bookmarked from early October, not in her recent browser history like I'd thought. She said she ended up there after Google searches had landed results that amount to just eat food when she literally could not. She said she felt disgusting and horrible even reading through those sites, but that they were the only things that got her through her classes without public humiliation. She said that practically not eating for a month was agony. The amount of guilt I feel is incredible. I asked her why she didn't say anything, and she said that after multiple conversations about money and begging me to budget she finally gave up and just got her own bank account. She did bring up what was mentioned here, about my thinking of her as so strong and unbreakable and how much pressure that put on her. She was crying at this point more than yelling, saying how she lost her best friend to an addiction and how this hadn't been a partnership in a long time and how alone she felt. How the program was almost as bad as my addiction because it was the only thing that started to matter to me. I guess she had a point. I went to almost 2 meetings a day. It was like a second job. We talked a lot about all of this, but I eventually did convince her to come back to Oregon and work on our marriage. I made a big effort and got a new therapist too in addition to the one I had. We started counseling together. I hired a financial advisor and started to seriously budget. We bought a house with the profits from my mom's place. At this point, I really thought the update I'd be writing was, it wasn't anorexia, I was a jerk, but with therapy and love it's happily ever after. But I, of course, had to go and royally screw this like I always do. In my new therapy sessions, my therapist helped me realize that a lot of my issues come from a place of not knowing who I am. He gave me a lot of homework assignments, one of which was on who I thought I was supposed to be in a marriage and if that was who I wanted to be. I don't really know what happened, but I was so tired of feeling guilty and tired of feeling like I failed as a husband and just sick of therapy and everything. I was tired of working hard all the time emotionally. I missed my addiction, I missed not feeling so much responsibly. I was tired of strict budgets. I just fantasized about back when I was in college and single and none of it mattered. What I wrote on the page was raw and full of resentments I didn't know I even had and had a lot of stuff about Allie. I looked at it after I wrote it and it didn't even sound like me. It wasn't even true. I was just angry and hurt and feeling so much shame it was like I couldn't handle it anymore. It honestly disturbed me how ugly it sounded, because they were things I didn't know I even thought about. I left the paper on my desk and figured I'd look at it when I got back from work. Long story short, Allie found it. Allie read it. I came home with a note taped to it that simply said, "I do not deserve this." She's right. She doesn't. She moved everything she had to the office and divided rooms while I was at work. She even put a lock on the door. I sent an email trying to explain that I didn't even mean it but got no response. She literally didn't speak to me for 2 weeks and would walk out of the room when I came in. A week ago she sat me down and told me that since we just bought the house, we'd likely lose thousands in closing costs so it didn't make sense to sell. I agreed. She told me that she was, however, filing for a divorce. And possibly going back to California. Then she left. It has hurt just writing this and remembering it, because I think I broke the heart of the woman I love more than anything. And she's gone and I miss her so much. She's back to not speaking to me. Half of me wants to beg her to come back, but I don't think I can keep any of the promises I have been making to her. I think I need to be single for a while and just focus on therapy. I don't know what's wrong with me or why I keep doing these things that hurt myself and others, but I need to get a handle on that before I think of tackling anything else. It cost me my marriage. It almost cost me my job. I think it's robbed my whole life. Allie seems good from what I've seen. Her sides of the fridge and pantry are filled with food and I saw her eating a giant salad the other day on the deck. So yeah. I think the eating disorder wasn't a thing, just something I clung to as not to have to focus on me anymore. I saw her the other day at the gym. This guy with bulging muscles was chatting her up near the weights and I thought I heard him ask her to dinner. She did that adorable blushing thing she did back when we were first dating, and I don't know what she said but I feel nauseous thinking about it. I hate myself. I want to hate muscle guy too, but I just can't. My desperate sister wants me to give her my baby and my husband. She's always been entitled but it's reached a new level. It's me, 28, my husband Lucas, 39, and my younger half-sister, dad's side, Leah, 24. My husband and I met through work 5 years ago but didn't date right away. We tied the knot by eloping 2 years ago as I predicted Leah would cause wedding drama. Leah herself had a failed engagement 1 year ago. We gave her our condolences but she said if I really cared I would stop wearing my engagement ring around her flaunting it. I obviously did not take it off. It's a vintage ring that is an heirloom in Lucas's family. I'm now 5 months pregnant with a baby girl. It wasn't planned but she's a very welcome surprise. Lucas is so excited to be a girl dad it's very funny. Ever since I announced my pregnancy, Leah has been very snippy and standoffish with me. It didn't really affect me, we're not close. But then I noticed when we'd go to visit my dad, or are at family gatherings she's very touchy with Lucas. She giggles at every joke he makes. It doesn't really bother me, I'm secure in my marriage and if anything it makes her look silly. We had a blended family event with both mom and dad's side and we were discussing baby names when Leah freaked out screeching at me that she's the one who deserves a husband and a baby not me because I never wanted marriage or kids, I was focused on getting a career. And stormed off. Later on my dad and his wife said she shouldn't have shouted but I was flaunting my marriage and pregnancy when I knew she had a failed engagement and had always wanted a baby. I thought that was it but yesterday the three of them asked to talk and they came over to ours and they legitimately asked if I would give Leah my baby. Like they weren't joking, they said it seriously. They said she deserved it more than me as she wouldn't neglect being a mother for a career. Lucas was stunned but then promptly got them out of our house. I heard Leah clinging to his arm telling him she could be a good stay-at-home mom. My mom and her side of the family are furious. Leah's mom said it was malicious of me to tell my mom's family and that I had really upset Leah when we eloped so I had to make it up to her and that my mom doesn't get a say. My entitled aunt desperately wants to buy back the house she sold to my sister for less than a third of the price. My entitled aunt has been the primary source of headache for us as a family emotionally and monetarily. She would always ask my mom and dad for a loan that would take years for her to pay. Where those loans go is one of our biggest questions to date. And whenever my mom or my eldest sister would ask her for the payment, she would always play the I'm family card and be all emotional to play on my mom's emotions. My mom has a soft spot with her family and she would most likely let it slide. But not my eldest sister. She would constantly remind and warn my aunt to pay her debts or she'll do something about it. My aunt would then turn to my mom asking for protection from my sister, to which my mom would talk to my sister about it. My sister though is not having it and is just relentless on her pursuit of making my aunt pay her debts. This got to a point where my aunt warned to sue my sister if she doesn't stop, to which my sister openly invited. Ultimately, our aunt paid but not without any parting words of how our family are a bunch of rude people and that she would never ever talk to us again. And such. But after a month or so, she made up with my mom and everything was well. Except for my eldest sister. So for context, my aunt put her house up for sale due to her children moving out. Initially, she said that the house was getting too big for me to keep and maintain and that she'd plan on buying a nice condominium near the downtown area. My uncle didn't want her to sell it to someone they do not know or at least does not have an affinity to, so she suggested to sell the house to a relative or a super close friend. My aunt then talked to my youngest sister and pitched her the idea of buying the house from her. At first, my sister didn't really want to entertain the idea of buying a house at this point in time as they have 2 kids that they are sending to a not-so-cheap school. But my aunt then pulled the sentimental value card and said that it would be a shame if the house was sold to someone else. Admittedly though, the house did have sentimental value for us siblings and cousins. We used to spend our summers over there as it's in a pretty nice neighborhood and we have friends there as well. A basketball court is fronting the house which is a win-win situation since they both have boys and her husband is a good basketball player. My aunt saw this as an opportunity for the boys and her husband to train or whatever. To my aunt's credit, she did have a nice pitch to my sister so I got to give her that. My sister and her husband discussed this in length. My sister and her husband decided to buy the house as they have long planned to have a house of their own. But her husband's grandmother begged them to stay at the current house they're living in until his grandmother can return back as she was sorting something out from a different city. So they decided to have at least until they are ready to move. My eldest sister, who by the way was against all of this, helped with all the contract and legal stuff so they can cover all their bases. The house and lot was sold for more or less 1 million pesos. My sister gave my aunt a more than generous amount of time to move out. When the time came that everything was moved out, my sister and her husband decided to pay a visit to their recently bought house and see to what extent the renovation would be. And to their surprise, the condition of the house was a literal crap hole. The walls and ceiling were falling apart, the tiles on the floor were chipped or starting to get chipped, the main bedroom was a mess, and the kitchen smelled like someone died in there for weeks. Although my aunt did disclose that some renovation work would be needed, but she never disclosed that the house was that effed up. But whatever, they decided to have the house renovated and it cost them another 300k. Once the renovation was done, the difference was night and day. As they were not moving into the new house yet, they listed the house for lease on some places and it garnered a lot of interest. The house was then leased to a foreign couple. The transaction went smoothly with the help of my eldest sister once again. And the couple even paid full price for the whole duration of the lease. Everything was as smooth as butter. Until yesterday. My sister got a call from the couple who leased the house early in the morning when she was dropping off the kids to school. This was on a Monday and my sister is usually super busy on these days. And this was one of those days. She answered the call and the following ensued. Sister, hello, husband of family moving in, haven't heard from you for a long time. May I know why you called? Husband, there's someone at the gate claiming that this is her house? Sister, confused, huh? She just might be a crazy person roaming around the area. Husband, well no, she showed me pictures of the house and are in it. At this point, my sister kind of knew what was happening so she hurriedly drove there. She was coming from the different side of town, so it took her about an hour to get there. When she got there, she saw our aunt outside screaming to let her in. The neighbors were already out and witnessing the commotion. Our aunt sees my sister and hurriedly goes to her. Aunt, hey sister. They won't let me in. Points towards the nice couple. Sister, aunt, what are you doing here? Aunt, well, this was once my house. Am I not allowed to enter? Sister, what do you mean? Aunt, I sold you this house, remember? And now I see that someone else is living here. Sister, well, they are leasing the house. Aunt, what? Why would you lease the house to someone I don't know? Sister, getting angry, because this is my house? I can lease it to whoever I want. At this point, my sister couldn't believe the stupidity of this situation and was kind of getting embarrassed with the neighbors looking on. So she told EA to go inside so they can discuss it. Once they were in the house, my sister introduced our aunt to the couple who leased the property and the following ensued. Aunt, to the couple, how much did you lease the house for? Husband, excuse me? Aunt, I said, how much did you pay for the lease? Husband, I'm sorry, but we don't see the need of discussing that to you. Aunt, why not? Turns to my sister and asks, how much are they paying for the lease? Sister, it's none of your business. This is my property and I'm already generous enough to have let you in. Aunt, what? I sold you this beautiful house and you treat me this way? Looks at the couple again, was the house sold to you too? Tell me. Husband, laughs, look lady, even if we did buy it, we don't need to tell you the specifics since we're not dealing with you. And no, we didn't buy this house. Aunt, you're a liar. Faces my sister, I'll take the house back now. Sister, excuse me? Are you out of your mind? Aunt, no I'm not. And it's clear to me that you're an irresponsible homeowner. Takes something from her bag. Here, take this 300,000 pesos and give me back my house. Sister, 300,000 pesos? Seriously? Slams the money to aunt's chest. My sister is fuming at this point, you need to leave my property right now. I won't allow you to disrespect me in front of these nice people. 300,000 when we bought this house from you for 1 million? Aunt, you can't kick me out of here. This is my house. Sister, grabs her phone, I'm calling the cops now. And then bolts out of there. On her way out, she screamed I'll come back and take the house. This is not the end of this. After aunt was nowhere to be seen, my sister broke down in front of the nice couple. The couple asked her a few details about our aunt and they were super understanding. My sister offered to return about a quarter of the total money they paid for the lease, but the couple said that it's not necessary. Her husband knew what happened and he was furious to a point that he almost went to the condominium where the aunt was living in, but my sister was able to calm her down before anything bad happened. As of now, my sister and her husband are seeking legal advice from my eldest sister and her firm. My ex's entitled spoiled girlfriend is trying to steal my house. This house is entirely mine and she thinks she deserves it. My ex-husband and I are in our early 40s and late 30s and have been divorced for almost 3 years now. While he did not want to get divorced, we separated and have been co-parenting our 2 preteens amicably. He lives within 5 blocks of our old home and while we have 50-50 custody, our kids freely bounce between our places and choose how they want to spend holidays. We've tried hard to create a sense of stability despite the change in our family situation and have standing tune-up therapy twice a year to make sure we're all comfortable with the arrangements. His recent partner Maria, 29, has been the only one to make it past the 6-month mark and prior to this encounter I would say that she makes him happy and is a pretty reasonable lady. She has a very sweet and precocious son, 9, that we all adore and generally I thought things were going well. I invited Maria to bring her son to my place if she would like him to join my kids in private language classes. She accepted and this has been going on for a few weeks now. My kids adore him. Last week she said something to me that was surprising. She asked me when I would be moving my things out so that my ex and her could be able to cohabitat. I was taken aback and confused, asking her to clarify my current home, this home? And she nonchalantly told me you don't need all this space for 3 people. We wouldn't have space at my ex's current condo. Her son looked so awful and embarrassed at this point, that I was like this conversation would need to include my ex. My kids and I live in a brownstone that my ex and I purchased together 50-50, but that I have been renovating since before the divorce. My ex lives in a nice condo that's spacious but is still a little bit of a man cave. Later in the evening I got a text message from her son that was pleading for me to forgive his mom, that he's sorry for his mom and to not tell my ex. I feel awful, but I think I should let my ex know this conversation occurred and let him handle it. I'm the single owner of the house. My ex insisted throughout the divorce that I keep it. We do co-own his condo though haha. My husband's Bible-loving homophobic mother is stalking and harassing us. My husband and me, we're a gay couple. We've been married for 2 years. When we met, my husband was heavily depressed because of mother-in-law, constant pressure to find a girl, marry and make a family as soon as possible. She didn't care that he's very young, she didn't care that he wanted to get an education first, her only concern was, you've a job and now you must have a family. Nothing else matters, just find a girl, marry and have babies. My husband and me, we've an age gap of 11 years, now he's 22 and I'm 33 but when we met, he was 20 and I was 31. That's why we kind of started as friends, because I was unsure whether something more was possible due to our age difference. However, as the time went by, we realized that we're falling in love. There's nothing we can do about it, and honestly, that age gap has never been a problem for us. We dated in secrecy for 2 years. He was staying at my place often, which led mother-in-law to think that he had found a bride. My husband was like, "Yes, Mom, I've someone I love," and mother-in-law was like, "Well, great, then bring her over so I can judge whether she's the right choice." Even if he was straight, that's a messed up thing to say, as she obviously meant that he can only marry her if mother-in-law approves it. Then my husband told me that he was tired of hiding, that he wanted us to marry, and then he would come out to mother-in-law. I was happy to hear it because I was getting tired of hiding too. We married the same way we dated, in secrecy. We only had a handful of good friends there with us, and the next day my husband and we both went to visit his mother to tell her the truth. Even though my husband warned me beforehand that it might get ugly, I was still hoping that his mother would support her son, as he's her child after all. Fast forward to meeting mother-in-law, it did get ugly, more ugly than I could even imagine. First she thought we were joking, and when she realized we're not, she got livid. I've heard many homophobic things in my life, but I had never met a person that would be more homophobic than she was. "You've got the gay disease, don't you?" "Oh no, you're not a crap pusher. There are no such abnormalities in our family. Where the hell did you get it from? 2 men cannot be a couple, that's bull. You need to see a psychiatrist." All these arguments and many more made me feel as if we were still living in the Middle Ages. She slapped my husband several times. When I pushed him behind me to defend him, she slapped me as well. She cursed me and cursed her son, telling him that he's not her son anymore and won't be until he refuses this lewd lifestyle, and yelled at us to get out of her house, which we gladly did. First we thought about going to the police and report mother-in-law for assaulting us, but then we realized that we cannot prove it. No witnesses, no cameras, no nothing. My husband was very upset because I come from a big family. I've 3 brothers and 2 sisters, I've aunts and uncles, and I've a bunch of cousins. He doesn't have a father, he doesn't have siblings, and his mother is basically his only relative. Of course, now he's a part of my family, but still, hearing your own mother saying such things to you is really hurtful. A few days passed and then my husband received a call from mother-in-law. It seemed that she had calmed down and was able to talk to him in a civilized manner. She visited him at his job, but my husband was wrong when he thought that she was going to accept us. Once again she tried to convince him that that's all nonsense, that our feelings aren't real, and that she has found a good doctor who could cure him from this. Of course, my husband refused to see any doctor because homosexuality is not a disease and no medically educated doctor would say a cure is necessary. And then she asked my husband what I'm doing for a living, what my profession is, and he told her that I'm a firefighter. Suddenly she seemed a lot happier and she was like, "Oh, then it's not so bad after all." My husband asked her why would my job change her thoughts about me, and she was like, "Well, it's a dangerous job, firefighters often have many accidents. Maybe he'll burn up one day." Like, how evil do you have to be to wish that to another person? Obviously she hates me the most, because I'm the eldest and she believes that I've messed up her son. I got to talk to her when she arrived at our house. Unfortunately she knows where we live because she followed my husband home one day, which is another twisted thing. She told me to leave her son alone, that he's not gay, that this is all my doing, and that she'll do everything in her power to separate us. I advised her to educate herself about homosexuality, as she's clearly very ignorant, and I couldn't convince her that I'm not after a quick fling with her son. I love him and want to spend the rest of my life with him. I told her that 2 years ago she had led her son to depression by bugging him about girls and not letting him live his life. She was like, "I was just making sure he doesn't forget that he has some obligations in this life." What? Since when is marriage an obligation? I also reminded her that she wished me dead. I haven't forgotten it, and she was like, "You deserve more than death, you child lover." I honestly don't know how and why that came across, because my husband has never been underage when dating me. Last night she tried to break into our house. I don't know why, but it was obviously her. In the middle of the night, we were awoken by our dog barking and someone banging at our front door. Someone was jerking the doorknob for a good while. We didn't answer the door, of course, but my first thought was that it was mother-in-law. When the morning came and we were leaving for work, the first thing I saw when I opened the door were many notes taped to it. They were all typed on the computer and they all had the same content dash. Horrible things to me. There was my name and things like, "Die, I'm waiting for your death, you old F word, you child lover, I hope your stick falls off," etc. My husband saw these notes too, and we were both sure that it was mother-in-law because no one else would do it to us. We talked to a police officer who's a friend of ours, and he said that we should save all these notes, but actually, the police cannot do anything because she hasn't actually physically attacked us. As long as those are just words, they can't do anything to her. Even when we told him that she hit us when we met her for the first time, he said that the main thing is proof, and if we don't have proof, then police can't help us. We're actually thinking about moving because we don't feel safe anymore. We don't know what else could come to her mind. It's so very sad that we live in a country that's supposed to be safe for gay people, and still there are some individuals that don't realize that it's the 21st century and that people are different.
My mom's psycho ex-boyfriend put my family first on his to unalive list. He took this list seriously. When I was 13, my parents got divorced, and 2 years later my mother ended up reconnecting with a former fling named Sam. I remember my mom speaking very highly of this man, in ways she never really did about my father when they were together. Sam had lost his daughter to cancer and his former wife to suicide, and my mom was the first woman he was talking to after losing his family. Sam experienced brain damage after getting into a fight with some junkies to defend someone else they were attacking, and my mom couldn't stop talking about how brave he was. The only thing that halted their relationship was that Sam lived in a different state. For my 16th birthday, I had begged my dad to see this musical that was touring, and was making a stop in a city in California close enough to make a day trip out of. My dad agreed. It was going to be him and I for the weekend, and I was elated. Until my mother found out that the city we were visiting was the same city that Sam lived in. My mother begged to come along with us, so her and Sam could spend the weekend together, and while I was hesitant, my father agreed. Even after divorcing, he still wanted to do whatever to make her happy. I, on the other hand, was not happy about having my mom tag along, even for the car ride, but my dad convinced me that it was for my mom's sake, and everything would be fine, so I begrudgingly agreed to have her travel with us to California. The plan was that my dad would drop my mom off at Sam's house, where she would spend the night, take him and I to go see the musical, get dinner together, return to a hotel, and then pick my mom up the next day. Everything was going according to plan up to this point. The musical was fantastic, and my dad and I were having a great time. When him and I were eating at the restaurant, he got a text message from my mother, and that is when things started to go downhill. My dad seemed nonchalant about what was going on, but was clearly invested in this text message conversation he was having, so I started to pry. He explained that he and I would be picking my mom up after dinner, instead of tomorrow. I ask why, and he says that it's adult stuff and he can't tell me. A couple minutes pass, me still eating, and my dad still texting my mom, and he informs me that we aren't picking her up, that things progressed and he is sending an Uber to pick my mom up immediately. We wait in the restaurant until my mom arrives in the Uber. I'm growing more and more curious about what happened, but don't pry too much, because I assume that something went wrong with my mom and Sam romantically, or possibly sexually. When my mom arrives, and we all load up into my dad's car, she begins to talk, eerily calm the entire time. She explains that her and Sam were having a fine time at first, watching a movie and cuddling, and when things started to take a more adult turn, Sam started crying and talking about how much he missed his wife and daughter. My mom tried consoling him, but it wasn't working, and he kept trying to make advances towards my mother while in this emotional state. My mom started to get a weird feeling about it, and made up a lie to Sam that she got a text from me saying that I fell ill and wanted her to come back to the hotel, and she had to leave. Sam immediately flipped, going from mourning to anger. He started yelling at my mom, telling that she couldn't leave. When she insisted, he punched the wall so hard that his hand broke, and he had to go to the ER, giving my mom an opportunity to leave. I was floored. Despite barely being 16, I was old enough to recognize the telltale signs of an abuser, and alarms were going off in my mom. Despite my shock, and fear on my mother's behalf, my mother seemed calm, even insisting that she felt bad for Sam. Because of his wife and daughter, and his brain damage, and now, his broken hand. My mother behaving like everything was alright confused me to no end, but we were heading back to the hotel, and leaving California in the morning, so I didn't push too hard. Things continued to escalate from this point. Once we get to the hotel, my mom receives a text from Sam, saying that when they tested his blood at the ER, he tested positive for HERPS, and it was my mom's fault and he was going to sue her. For context, both my parents are HERPS positive. My mom is upfront about this with her partners. My mom talks to some of her friends in the medical field after this, and they raise some concern at this. Why would they test his blood for diseases when he is in the ER for a broken hand? Not to mention, HERPS takes days, if not weeks, to show up in the bloodstream. It is impossible that he would have gotten that from my mom. Despite this, my mom still continues to express sympathy towards him. It's late by this point, so we head to bed. My dad snores louder than any other person I have ever met, and not quite thinking ahead, I didn't bring any earplugs or headphones with me. I asked my mom if I could borrow her phone and earbuds to listen to music while I sleep, to drown out my dad's snores. She agrees, and I pull up some random music to make you fall asleep YouTube video and lay down to get some rest. Unfortunately for me, at least once every half hour, my mom gets a phone call from Sam, interrupting the video, lulling me to sleep. I turn the ringer off, too close to sleep to fully understand what's going on, but it's to no avail. The incoming call pauses the music, thus allowing me to hear my dad snoring and waking me up, again and again and again. I somehow manage to get some sleep, but by the time it's morning, my mom has dozens of missed calls from this guy. I believe he left voicemails as well, but I'll be honest in admitting that I don't quite remember what he said. Nothing good, I know. My mom still doesn't recognize. This behavior is odd, and my dad seems to be keeping his mouth shut, so without any fanfare, we pack up and leave the hotel, beginning our drive out of California and back home. We're about an hour or so outside of the city. I'm sitting up front with my dad, and my mom in the back, on her phone, when my mom tells my dad to pull over at the next stop. He does, and they get out of the car and start talking. They're too far away from the car for me to hear anything. After a couple minutes, my mom gets back inside the car, and I ask her what happened. She explains that she's been receiving non-stop texts from Sam during the duration of the drive so far. Texts claiming that he has friends in the police force who he is going to convince to mark my dad as a child lover and are pissed, neither of which is true, and then call CPS to get me taken away from my family. Texts detailing his firearm collection. How everyone in his life leaves him. How everyone in his life hurts him. How he has our address. How he has a list of everyone in his life who has ever hurt him, and my mom and us are at the top of his list, and he's going to be getting his revenge. My dad is on the phone with the police outside as she explains this. Once we're back home, miles away from Sam, my mom receives even more texts from him. I know you called the police on me. They showed up to my house, searched everything and found nothing. I'm still here and I'm not leaving. My mom immediately calls the police again, and speaks to the same woman my parents spoke to before. My mom explains the text that she got, and asks the dispatcher why he wasn't detained or anything. He's clearly a threat to himself and to others. The dispatcher is confused, and explains to my mom that Sam isn't at home still. The police arrested him, and he was being held in a psychiatric hospital. There was no way for him to still have his phone on him, but somehow, he did. We don't hear from Sam after this phone call. The dispatcher must have informed who she needed to inform, and his phone was properly confiscated. Things are pretty silent for the next few days. My mom decides to call Sam's sister, having known her from when my mom and Sam first dated, and getting back in contact during this current relationship. My mom explains the situation, and Sam's sister is beyond horrified, and apologizing for her brother's behalf. My mom still tries to empathize with Sam, saying that the loss of his wife and daughter must have been what caused him to spiral like this. Sam's sister stops her, confused. Sam's daughter never died of cancer, and his wife never unalived herself. They simply divorced, the ex-wife gaining custody of the daughter. I think it was at that moment it finally hit my mom how serious the situation was, and how deeply ill this man she once loved was. My nightmare stepfather spent years hiding a disgusting secret from everyone, and I finally revealed it, then ghosted the entire family. I am from one of those families that have a lot of people that all go to church and then dinner together. Cousins thick as thieves, sisters are best friends, etc. Everyone just hangs out with each other. Up until I married my husband, I was exactly the same and very close with everyone. Now, a quick insight into my bleak childhood. The close family belonged to my mother, who married several men over the course of my childhood. My father, who had primary custody, was an angry substance addict who was forcibly removed as my guardian by the state when I was 12 after roping me in my sleep. At the same time, my mom Linda married her final husband Ben, who was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He really stepped up to fit into a corny stepfather rom-com, where there's baseball in the park, wiping up makeup from breakups, shopping sprees, just dad stuff. I kept getting told he was a great dad and we were so lucky to have a man to really be there for us. It was supposedly the cornerstone of his and my mom's relationship. He was a first responder too. Just all around perfect. I heard it until I was grown and moved out. But there was one thing about him, and it's that he had been roping me every morning since I was 14. I never told anyone, because I believed them, he was great. Except in the morning. Fast forward to meeting my husband. Basically, he loved me through a lot of coping with my father's abuse. From the start, my family hated my now husband. Members of my family actively tried to break us up by going as far as trying to plant evidence of him cheating, and through a lot of negativity I grew distant with everyone outside of Linda, Ben, and my siblings. But still seeing them for events like Christmas, Easter, etc. Then one night a few months ago I felt the need to tell my husband about Ben. It had been bothering me ever since I had had my daughter. And it came to a head. So I told him. And he reacted like a man who loves me the way he does. He cut all contact between himself, his family and his children, and Ben. And told me the next move was up to me and he'd support whatever I needed. So I decided to tell my mom the big truth. It was weeks later and I'm still not sure if I did the right thing, or just hurt people for no reason. Well, my mama bear mother is still married to him, and plans to stay that way. He's changed. Why didn't I tell her when it happened? Etc. Not what I expected, and I was genuinely hurt that I was disregarded so clearly for someone who had hurt me and caused me a lot of trauma. So when I saw her again, I lost it. I yelled at her for a lot of things that I had felt she had failed at, namely protecting me from my abusive father. She knew about the situation for 6+ years before charges were filed on him, and failing to value me now while projecting this stupid mama bear image. Well, I felt better and left. I haven't spoken to anyone but my one sibling since. The problem is I lost it in the middle of a family game night where almost all my extended family was in attendance. So now the secret's out and I feel no need to talk to any of them ever again, as everyone wanted to keep it in the family and for me to maintain a relationship with my mother. My husband's family has treated me so much better than any of them. But maybe they deserve an explanation. Maybe I shouldn't have told my secret because my mom says that he's changed. What was by far your worst ever intimate experience? When I was 21, I was in a sorority. Every year we used to raise funds and send our graduating sisters to someplace fun for spring break. That year we decided on Vegas, so I and 5 other of my friends went there for a few nights. I ended up hooking up with this obscenely rich middle-aged guy there. It wasn't planned or anything. I actually don't care for older men and think it's creepy when they hit on me by default. But my friends and I had a crappy first day when these guys we met ended up getting too drunk and rowdy that it became a turn-off, so we moved on. We got invited to this private party in one of the penthouse suites at our casino, so we said F it and went. The party was surprisingly great. These middle-aged guys had the whole 5,000 square foot suite to themselves. They had some bartenders, a DJ playing this weird fusion music that otherwise really set the vibe, and there was a caterer making these delicious finger foods, etc. Anyway, I found out it wasn't a bunch of rich middle-aged guys hosting this, it was one really rich guy bringing his buddies along for a good time. I know because I ended up talking to him. He was 42 at the time and seemed chill. We were talking about his traveling for a while, and when I mentioned I lost my vape pen on the casino floor earlier, he told me he had a volcano vaporizer set up and this strain called wedding cake in his personal suite. I'm not naive. I knew he was basically asking me to sleep with him, but at that point I was starting to get buzzed, and after meeting those guys earlier I was getting H-riny and wanted the D, so I went along with it. So anyway, we go in the room, get baked, and sure enough we start intimacy. Everything got hazy at this point, but I remember getting ready to give him brain and being surprised at how big he was. He asked me if he could nut in my nostril. Now I really don't like getting nut in my nostril, but I just wanted to get through with this. And get effed and go to bed, so I said sure. The last thing I remember was asking him to nut in my nostril and trying my best to sound convincing. I woke up at 5-ish, still in a slight haze. He was snoring softly next to me. The shame started creeping in. My whole womanhood was sore. The last time it felt like that was when I had intimacy with a hung guy, so I'm guessing we had piv at some point. I slipped on my dress, grabbed my shoes and took the elevator to my floor. I shuffled down the hallway. There were a few other couples, mostly older ones, shuffling down the hallway too. I got to my room and went into the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror and I was horrified. I had dried nut all over my face. All over my face, all in my hair, all over my chest, my arms, everywhere. I walked down that long hallway glazed like a fresh donut.
Am I the a-hole for telling my friend that he deserved to have his girlfriend cheat on him and then get himself beat by her affair partner? My friend Mark has recently been having a lot of relationship troubles with his girlfriend Leah. They got together back in February of this year, and their relationship has become a complete train wreck, mainly because of Leah. Mark was, and still is, head over heels for Leah. He has told me and my other friends that she is definitely the one and that he eventually plans on marrying and settling down. This all seemed both premature and immature to me, especially considering it had only been a month into their relationship, but it's beside the point. Leah, on the other hand, is a nightmare. She's cheated on Mark several times now, and every time she does, she gives Mark some lame story about him not being supportive enough, or that she made a mistake, or that she wanted to see him get jealous for her sake. He gobbles it up every time. According to Mark, Leah largely acts like this because her father was very abusive towards her and her mother, and therefore she carries a lot of trauma with her. Mark constantly reiterated that he wants to help her work past that, but things haven't really been going his way. Since September, Leah has been seeing this other guy Derek, and she's 100% infatuated with him. Mark has been arguing a lot with Leah about Derek, and she has threatened to leave Mark if he doesn't just simply accept her for who she is. He accepted this. Not only that, he and Leah have entered what he calls a semi-open relationship. This means, according to Mark, that Leah is allowed to see Derek as much as she wants, but Mark isn't allowed to see anyone else. This is because Leah feared Mark would become emotionally invested in them and leave her. Mark begrudgingly agreed to this and has been seething for months about it. Since about November, Leah has been seeing Derek more than she does Mark. While Mark doesn't admit to it, our other friends have told me that she is essentially in a full-time relationship with Derek and only comes to Mark for money and emotional support. I remember Mark telling me angrily once how he gave Leah $120 so she could go out to a fancy restaurant with Derek. Fast forward to this week, and I'm back home for the break. Mark started texting me on Saturday, saying that he hated Derek for trying to steal his girl and wanted to beat him that night. He said that he wanted me to come along since all of our other friends couldn't. Since I just got back home the day before, I was still exhausted, so I point-blank refused Mark's request. I told him that Leah was a lost cause, and I wasn't going to fight some people I'd never seen for her. Mark started begging me, saying that Leah is the love of his life and that he needs my help. I refused again. He then says that he'll go on his own, but I told him that he probably shouldn't. I woke up Sunday morning to more than 300 messages on my phone from Mark and all our friends. Long story short, Mark went over to Derek's place to bring Leah back. He ended up getting his butt kicked by Derek in front of Leah. I called Mark and told him that he should probably talk to a lawyer or something, but he refused since Leah asked him to not escalate the situation. I then told him that he was being dumb, and this triggered him so much. He started saying how I was a bitch and a snake for not backing him up and how I was a fake friend. I was so irritated at this point, so I told Mark that he deserved to get jumped and that it made sense why Leah preferred Derek over him. He hung up on me, and we haven't spoken since.